All right, so I'm not going to give all of the background to this because hopefully you guys know that this debate has been ongoing for a while now as to the sources of COVID. There are basically three possibilities that I have heard that have any credence, that I give any credence to even be part of the debate. One is that the U.S. leaked it or created it intentionally, and it was released as a bioweapon. I mean, actually, I don't give that one much credence, but it's part of the debate. One is the second one is that it was created by either U.S. funding and help with the lab in China, or with other bioweapons labs. There was efforts to study gain of function. Many people know that, and it leaked out. It was unintentional, but it leaked out. And then the third is that it was not connected to any of that, and it was simply jumped from animals to humans. And the U.S. is trying to put the location of that animal jump to humans at the Chinese market. So I wanted to show just a little of the kind of two sides of this, because these came out. These two analyses came out, almost within a day of each other, and I'm going to let you decide. I can't know everything. I'm not an epidemiologist, and I feel like not enough people are willing to admit that they can't know everything, to admit that they aren't an epidemiologist, to admit that they haven't fucking studied the diseased bats or whatever the fuck. And it's like, look, there's a lot I can know. I can know all kinds of levels of how corrupt our government is, but there's also things that I can't know. And I feel like if you're going to talk about this shit, you should admit what it is you can't know. And this is something that you simply, for now, cannot know. But I'm going to give you two sides of it. So this was published by Eric Swiss, who on his foreign policy analysis, I'm a big fan of. I trust him on foreign policy analysis in many regards, and I've quoted him before. This is kind of a little different. But anyway, and he published it at the Duran, and his headline is "Proven COVID-19 was part of a U.S. biowarfare program carried out in Wuhan to spark hatred against China." And he then gets into some of the details, which get pretty wonky. But he says, I'll read a couple of sentences of it. Focusing on SARS-like virus sequences isolated from Chinese horseshoe bats, the results indicate a significant threat posed by WIV1-CoV. That WI refers to Wuhan Institute of Virology, and the virus is the prototype of SARS-CoV, the virus that causes COVID-19 disease. COVID-19 is the disease. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. So these experiments were crucial to the development of the virus that causes COVID-19. Both full-length and chimeric WIV1-CoV readily replicated efficiently in human airway cultures and in vivo in living organisms, suggesting capability of direct transmission to humans. Now, and it continues. Actually, let me show you the other article, and then I'll give you a little bit more of my analysis. All right, so that came out almost the same day as, here is the Atlantic, which, yes, I know the Atlantic is, sometimes they do occasional good article, but in general, they are a U.S. empire propaganda machine, like all the anti-Russia stuff during Russiagate, all that shit. They're a little bit more factual or research than like a frothing at the mouth lunatic like a Rachel Maddow, but they often do the U.S. empire bidding in many regards. And here, this just came out the other day. the strongest evidence yet that an animal started the pandemic. A new analysis of genetic samples from China appears to link the pandemic's origin to raccoon dogs. I don't even know what raccoon dogs are, but for 3 years now, the debate over the origins of coronavirus pandemic has ping-ponged between two big ideas. The SARS-CoV-2 spilled into human populations directly from a wild animal source, and that the pathogen leaked from a lab. Through a swirl of data obfuscation by Chinese authorities and politicalization. Isn't that just politicization? Why politicalization? Anyway, within the United States and rampant speculation from all corners of the world, many scientists have stood by the notion that this outbreak, like most others, had purely natural roots. But that hypothesis has been missing a key piece of proof: genetic evidence from the Hunan seafood wholesale market in Wuhan, China, showing that the virus had infected creatures for sale there. Now, an internal team of virologists, genomicists, and evolutionary biologists may have finally found crucial data to help fill that knowledge gap. A new analysis of genetic sequences collected from the market shows that raccoon dogs being illegally sold at the venue could have been carrying and possibly shedding the virus at the end of 2019. Okay, a few things here. So these are kind of the two sides of things. Like I mentioned, there is a third, which they mentioned in this article. The third possibility is that it leaked from a lab unintentionally. And here's the reason the Atlantic is that you probably shouldn't trust them, is they're often doing the U.S. bidding, the U.S. empire's bidding. It is beneficial for the U.S. if the U.S. was involved, which the U.S. helped fund the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Fauci and others were, in fact, involved in the funding and connections to that. Now, I think that things have gotten a little unhinged in the way people talk about this, where they just say, oh, funding a lab that's working on virology, that's working on viruses, that in and of itself is fucking horrific. And it's like, no, if you were to take a non-corrupt view of this, then people should be doing work on viruses to figure out how they form, how they replicate. Now, doing gain of function work is truly troublesome, because it's like, well, why the fuck are you doing that? Do you really want a virus to be worse? Why would you want a virus to be worse? So there's that question that I think is an important one. But so I want to say there's reasons you shouldn't trust the Atlantic. Again, often you're doing U.S. empire bidding. There's nothing that you or I could do to prove that these lab results are true. I don't care how many people yell at you, but it was in the Atlantic. Look, this epidemiologist did it. It's like, I haven't seen. Are you going to show me? Are you going to bring the microscope so I can stick my head on there and look through it and study what it should look like? And like, we can't do that. Like, we can't know whether this is a bullshit study in order to say that the U.S. had no connection to creating this and it leaked out of a lab. B, it's attempt to put the blame on China, right? Because they say these type of animal was illegally being sold to the market. And my point on that is, let's say this is true. Let's say it's a true article. I don't really think that's China's fault, like the government's fault, that a raccoon dog was sold at a market. Could you imagine if the U.S. government was at fault for every legal thing that's sold in the United States? There's a shit ton of sex trafficking that goes on through the United States. I wouldn't necessarily say that Congress is at fault for all of it. They might be at fault for not passing better regulations, but there's how much drugs are sold in the United States. I don't blame Congress because a drug is sold. So yes, and you can get in there's a sliding scale on that. If stuff is egregious and going on all the time, you can say, why isn't the government stepped in? So it's like, as we have lead-tainted pipes across the United States, you can say, why isn't the government fucking stepped in and fixed it? So yeah, there are those levels of things. But but this article is trying to make you think that if this is true, that the Chinese government is at fault for creating the pandemic, when I think the accurate view, the intelligent view, if this article were true, is to say that fucking sucks. I wish people wouldn't sell illegal animals. We should all around the world try and crack down on that. But that's not China's fault. That's not a Chinese person's fault. You're going to blame all of China. You're going to blame 1.4 billion people because a raccoon dog was sold to a fucking idiot. Anyway, that's insanity. So that's if that article's true. Now, in terms of the other article, again, I think most people don't even understand half of the shit that's being said in the different types of strains and what happened and who's. But on top of that, it's like you're not actually looking at these strains. Who is it that proved that this? So, I take discussing these things is important, but I take some issue with the headline: proven COVID-19 was a weapon that was released by the United States. Now, would I put it past the United States to do such a thing? Fucking no, I wouldn't. The United States is dumb enough and awful enough to do such a thing. So I don't say for certain the United States didn't release COVID on the world. But in terms of like it releasing it to blame China, well, then they did a terrible job, because I don't think China's gotten a lot of blame for it. I mean, the kind of the worst blame that China got for it so far has been Donald Trump running around saying, well, China did it. It's China. So if the United States wanted to do something like that, then there would have been 24/7 coverage about China has done this intentionally. And there wasn't. I mean, there was some coverage about it. Maybe it came from China. So there was some of that, but I don't think China's reputation is really harmed by this pandemic. Now, the whole world was harmed in other ways, but so this seems pretty far-fetched to me. Now, I'd say what is more plausible is that the U.S. was indeed doing, the U.S. and others, if they were working with other countries, I don't know, but that they were indeed fucking around with viruses, to use the technical terminology, and whoopsie, it got out of the lab, because there's a lot of whoopsie in the United States. How many nuclear bombs have we accidentally dropped? I don't mean they all went off. None of them have gone off, but we've like dropped and lost multiple nuclear bombs. So there's a lot of whoopsie in the United States. But that would make more sense to me than intentionally, because even rich people have gotten sick from COVID. Even rich people have died from COVID. So the idea that this was, we'll kill millions of people around the world and possibly a lot of rich people, but we'll get to blame China for it, seems like a aggressively dumb plan, like dumber than normal, dumber than what the U.S. would normally be dumb about. So to me, that seems pretty far-fetched. But of these three possibilities, the intentional lab leak, the possible lab leak, and the animals, fucking guy fucked a raccoon dog on a bet, of the three, I'd say the two most plausible are raccoon dog and accidental lab leak. Now, can I or you or any of us sit down and say, I saw the fucking COVID strain SARS-2 Widgeon-Walkerts. I had the microscope, and I looked at it through at the sample in the petri dish, and I know, okay, that's where. None of us can do that. None of us can say that. And so you have to decide who is the scientist that you trust to tell you this. For me, it's not neither of them. I don't trust whoever the U.S. whoever says the U.S. Intentionally leaked it, and I don't trust the fucking Atlantic and their science. I don't trust either. So I'll leave the analysis at that. And I'm sorry, I know you guys come to me for definite, this is who did it, this is what happened, here's the play-by-play. But in this case, I thought it was an important story, even though I don't think we'll actually ever have the answer with 100% accuracy.